say he's a technical wizard. Some say he was born in Cornwall, while some say he's on a journey. It's The Journey, and here's your host, David Hackett.
Our guest today on The Journey describes himself as a podcast host like myself and a publisher, an author, writer and speaker. And through his speaking and writing, he helps people overcome adversity, thrive and lead extraordinary lives. He is also an independent thinker. That's a good thing because independent thinking is always a bonus, and an inspirational and entertaining speaker. So, because I don't want to go too much into his bio, we welcome Peter to The Journey.
Thank you, David. It's good to be here. I really feel privileged to be on your show.
I always say to guests, everyone has a journey, everyone has a unique journey, and we touched upon that before recording started. And your journey starts obviously when you was younger. I'm not going to go into the joke how I say it every time, but every journey is where you are born. But what's your earliest memories possible?
I listened to your show with Liz, and I heard that question. I started thinking about it, and I have vague memories of when I was 4 years old, and we were living in a suburb of London called Cranham in England, and in a semi-detached house that's backed onto a farm which had woods. And my mother had my brother at home with a midwife. And so obviously things being of my generation, things were much more conservative and childbirth was not discussed much with young children. So I was told to go outside and amuse myself in the garden, whereupon I took the dog and crossed a railway track behind the house and went off to the woods where there was some fairly deep ponds and amused myself for a couple of hours. And when I came back, I was in really serious trouble because my father had been tearing his hair out trying to find where I was, and they had visions of me being run over on the road or falling in a pond. And I think I got my backside gently walloped. That's about my earliest memory, so about 4 years old. There's a few others which are so vague. But that's probably my earliest one.
And you touch upon previous guests for listeners, watchers. That is, I believe, Liz Bloomfield you was talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'll make sure if anyone misses that, there will be a link somewhere on the screen in a minute. But
yeah, she was very good. I would suggest to anyone watching this, get on and watch that episode. She's good.
Yeah. So you touch upon, and I know this is because I've been British myself, you said about childbirth was a taboo subject for younger generations of the generation. I forgot what they call the generations, but I know I'm like Generation X or something. But the fact was, it was taboo because of the reasons. You're not allowed around. Can't be around. Now, understandable, but at the same time, it was an experience that you was going to be an older brother to a sister or brother. So, things have changed now because they encourage it. But back then, I understand it was a difficult thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I see it. But it's just the mindset of how certain people were like, okay, you're not allowed. Even my generation, there were still elements. I'm not saying I'm an older brother or sister because I'm only child, but there were still elements of you can't do that, can't do this. And I was raised by my mother to not swear. Now she only heard me swear like 3-4 times, but I still got told off if I did swear in front of her.
Absolutely. I was exactly the same. And in Rhodesia, we had a carbolic soap called Lifebuoy, which was a red-colored soap, which every household had for hand washing really dirty stuff. And that was the punishment as a child. If you were caught swearing, you had your mouth washed out with Lifebuoy soap, and it was not pleasant. So you just didn't swear in front of parents.
Yeah. So you talk about London, and obviously London was very young, and you moved to Rhodesia as a young boy, and it said you spent most of your life in Southern Africa. That's why you sound more South African more than British. But
Yes.
and then it's about talking about your corporate career, including marketing management in large and small companies. How was that for you? Because obviously being in Rhodesia, it was obviously what you grew up with. It was the norm for you. You didn't see the, as we would call it, the Western world.
No. The culture in Rhodesia was very British. One, and again, we're going back many years because I'm a boomer. So I spent my childhood in Rhodesia in the late 50s, early 60s. I was a teenager in the 60s. One thing that sticks in my mind is the British class system. So we went to Rhodesia because my father worked for the British government and got a posting through, I guess, the Commonwealth Office or Foreign Affairs or something to work at the High Commission in Rhodesia. And he didn't come from a rich family at all. He'd educated himself more than anything. His mother died when he was young. His father was hardly literate, but he did very well, passed his exams. But he was always seen, and people of his level in the civil service were seen as middle class, perhaps, whereas the High Commissioner and the ambassadors were all most definitely upper class, and the two did not mix except on extremely formal functions, right?
Yeah.
So it was. Did I have a problem with it? No, that's the way things were. So looking back, I could say it was discriminatory, but it never occurred to us at the time. Everyone knew their position in life, and you aspired to get better, but that was the system. So that was something that sticks in my mind, which was the British influence. When I went to South Africa as an adult, 29 years old, things were completely different because there was a degree of anti-British sentiment still from the Boer War, and quite justified because the Afrikaans people, or the Boers as they were called, were treated horribly by the British. So there was no class system in South Africa except for money. If you had money, you were considered somewhat above those who didn't have money, right? Which is much like the same all over the world. So there's one thing that I remember from the culture.
Yeah, and we touch upon the raid culture was back, this was when South Africa was still in its tightest regime before the late Nelson Mandela came along. So it was very strict. It wasn't as it is now. Yes, you do still get the violence. Yes, you do get, the racists. But, it was, Nelson Mandela set South Africa free when he became free. That's how I see it.
Well, that's the way it's portrayed in the Western media. Having lived there through that period, my view is 180 degrees different from that. And I'll say, and I'm not ashamed of saying, that had Mandela done what he did in North America, in any state with a death sentence, he would have been hung. In Canada, he would have died in prison for life imprisonment because he's portrayed as a saint and a savior. But he, through his instructions from his prison cell in Robben Island, the ANC murdered at least 5,000 black South Africans of the Zulu tribe, many by the necklace method, where they put a kota around their neck, soaked it with petrol, gasoline, set it on fire. And I was living in Westville near Durban, which is in Natal at the time, and we saw the fires from the townships where people were and houses were being burnt by the ANC, not by whites at all. So the real story of someone who's having lived there, and yes, many parts of apartheid were wrong. I'm not defending everything that happened under apartheid. Many bits were wrong, and the white government made many mistakes. I'm not trying to paper over that, but the real story is way different to what has been portrayed in the media, certainly, from my experience from living there.
Yeah, I totally understand that, because media as a whole do portray either the good side or the bad side. And in this case,
Sure.
like you said, I've studied it from the historical point of view and being in the media. Yeah, I see the two elements. So I understand that there was more to what you see. And then looking at it, the media point of view, you have to understand, yeah, it was like this, but you have to tell it like that. And it's very, not saying you guided, but you told because of the rules you get set as a media outlet. You get told you got to do this.
Sure.
So I understand the rules of that, and it's just a shame that no one sees the true reflection of that.
Sure, it is, and the real tragedy is both in Rhodesia, as Rhodesia was in South Africa. Those two countries together accounted for, I can't remember the exact figures, but under white rule, 80% of the economic activity of the whole African continent. South Africa alone produced at one time something like 80% of the electricity on the continent, had 80% of the doctors, 80% telephones, and all that sort of thing. And much of that infrastructure in both those countries has been totally destroyed since the ZANU government took over in Mugabe in Rhodesia and became Zimbabwe, and since the ANC took over in South Africa. South Africa should be exporting electricity to the whole continent as it used to, and is now, they're having power outages all the time through mismanagement and all this. So that's the tragedy to me, that the bottom line is the lives of the average black person in those two countries, the average is no better, and certainly in Zimbabwe considerably worse than it was under white rule. The lives of the elite and a certain element of the higher class, higher income earners in South Africa is considerably better. Sure, I'm not arguing that, but for the majority, unemployment is bad. That's a high horse I don't really want to take too much time on, but I'm just saying that to me the tragedy is not that I lost my farm in Zimbabwe because of government action. The tragedy is the 180 people I employed on my farm are no longer employed and many are dead. That's what the Western world does not see.
Because you wrote in your bio about moving to Zimbabwe, starting another business that you sold, and then became a farmer. And then in 2002, you became a casualty of the government's illegal and violent policy of driving commercial farmers off their farms.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's sad in its own right mind, because you should be free to be yourself. And then political unrest drove you out, it seemed.
Yeah, and it hasn't benefited anyone except a few cronies of the ruling party, judges, generals who were given the farms. Most of those farms, our farm has returned virtually to bush. They burnt the houses down. Before that, they stole everything they could off all the workers' houses we'd built, stole the fencing, stole the irrigation piping, all the electrical stuff, and then burnt the remaining houses. So we've seen Google satellite photos of that farm. It's got little goat tracks where goats and a few cattle are wandering around. All our fields overgrown with bush and weeds. And it's not supporting anybody except one family who are relying on handouts and a couple of other squatters. Whereas, as I say, we employed 180 and we had around between 300 and 400 living on the farm, living off that farm. Right.
Yeah. So it says about when you established and ran your own, this is going to Southern and South Central Africa. It was you followed your life by establishing and running your own small factory and export trading business. You traveled extensively in Southern and Central Africa until several war and two major markets wiped out the export business. You lost your business and your own, becoming bankrupt, and then your marriage ended. Now, this is shows how things are, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it just shows how, and I touch upon this in the loosest way possible. It just shows how brutal things can be. Especially
that's right.
For you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but that's part of life too. So, I must be one of the very few people who's lost 3 properties in a lifetime because of politics. When I left Rhodesia to go to South Africa, I had a very small mortgage on my house, but the economic climate, it was about to become Zimbabwe, so investor confidence had evaporated. Property market had plummeted. I could not sell my house even for what I owed on the mortgage. So I gave the keys to the bank, said it's your problem. And then in South Africa, when I went bankrupt, that was the time they were letting Mandela out of jail, and squatters were flooding into the country area where I lived. I had a little country estate of about 5 acres, and just not far from me, squatters were just pitching up and taking over land. And the property market plummeted, and I couldn't sell that house. I didn't have a very big mortgage either, so I gave the keys back to the bank. And then in Zimbabwe, they took the farm. So that was the third property that in one lifetime. That's a hard act for anyone to follow, let me tell you.
But the thing is, you came out of it, you survived it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And, you know, we touch upon the future with where you are now in a minute, but, you know, it just shows that even at the lowest point of life, however many times you go there, because depression and anxiety will bring you down to that point, you know, losing money, going bankrupt. That's another point. No one really touches upon those little low light of life because they just think it's bad, it's negative. But this is part of a journey.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
This is what people forget. It is a journey. And that's why I always say it's not a straight, narrow, forward road where it's all smooth. You've got to go left. You've got to go right. You've got to turn around and then start again. That's how I see it.
Absolutely. And when I look back, what I find is amazing is how many of these twists and turns you're talking about, left, right, up, down, are totally unpredictable not long before, right? And I look, I'm glad I've had the adversity I've had, because I think it's enabled me to survive a lot of other stuff. But I look back at people who had smooth lives, you know, my generation who were born into fairly affluent families, did well at school, went to university, got good jobs, never really had any major hiccups. And then suddenly it all changed, and they really struggled to get over that. Some never did, whereas those who, like me, had all these ups and downs tended to bounce back a little bit better. And the lesson for me, and what I say when I was doing my public speaking, is our lives can turn upside down in a heartbeat. We can go from everything being 100% good and rosy one day to literally the next day the wheels falling off, and that's part of life too. And yet a lot of people can't believe that could happen so quickly. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I understand that. It's like I said about this again, about, you know, before we started recording, I'll talk about my life as well. And, you know, where I am now, I didn't expect to come this far because there's adversity in my life now. My mum raised me as a single mother. There was complications, you know, within life because they, you know, assessed me to be autistic, you know, and I was 18 when I was diagnosed. And, you know, there was stages in life where no one thought I would get anywhere. And, you know, I'm not condoning my mother in any way, but she found me difficult. And she said, you won't get far in life.
Sure.
And even before, you know, she's like, you won't be able to drive a vehicle. I know how to drive a vehicle. But the fact was, I overcome those adversities because it made me a better person. So your adversities, even though you experienced it in your experience 3 times, you overcame it. And I can see, you know, behind you the 5 steps to thriving on adversity. I like that because it takes,
That's my book, yeah.
Which we'll talk about in a minute. But, you know, you've been 3 steps already, then we talk about another 2. And that shows that anyone can overcome anything at any time.
Absolutely. And yours is a shining example. I mean, I'm sure you could tell a lot more. So, yeah, and yet the mystery of the human nature or the human psyche is that many people born with all the opportunities mess it up, right? And they hit the first hurdle and they go into booze or drugs or whatever, and they don't get over it. And that to me is the tragedy. That if people, and I mean people have had it far worse than me. My life's been fairly smooth compared to a lot of others. But if people that go through what you and I and many others go through and come out of it smiling, wow, people who are born with that silver spoon in their mouth, that they should be able to do it too. But sadly, often they don't.
Yeah, and the only support I think I really had when I was growing up was through my late grandparents, because they wanted the best for me. And I remember, and I still always remember my nan saying to me as I was younger, she said, I believe in you. You can do it. You be like me. And I think that's where I got the ambition. That's where I got the passion, because I've listened to those words.
Good, good.
So we go into saying you owed out for 3 years. You was illegally detained by the Mugabe government, imprisoned and prevented from returning to your farm. Losing the farm and all your assets left you with no home, no income, no capital, and no way to survive in that country. So you had to give up living what you moved to start again. And I like that. Because again, it shows you moved, you did a new chapter, and it says moving to Canada at the age of 54 and this sounds like me, with 2 suitcases and all saddle and very little cash. So you started again with nothing, just except for what you had in your hand.
Yep, that was it.
So that was an experience. And why did you choose Canada?
Okay, that's an interesting one, in that being born in Britain, I had a British passport. My wife's parents were born in Britain. She had a British passport. We could have gone there. The only family we had there was my late mother, who was still alive then, but she was, wow, what was she, over 80, and didn't have much in the way to help us start again. And my eldest son had moved to Canada in 1998 because he'd left South Africa to see the world, got to England, met a girl, and that was the end of seeing the world. And they got married. And her father, she'd been brought up in Canada. Her father lived here in Brantford. So they came in early 98, I think, after their daughter was born, to visit him. And my son saw more opportunity here than he saw in the UK. So he moved here. So when we started having all these problems, or when we had the problems in Zimbabwe, our first prize would have been Australia, because it was Southern Hemisphere, similar climate. Lots of Rhodesians, South Africans had gone there. But at our age, in mid-50s, the Australian government said, you don't have any particular skills we need, so you need to put up a bond of $500,000 each, and then you can come tomorrow. And if you're self-sufficient in 5 years, we'll give you your bond back again. I think that wasn't going to happen. So we thought, what about the southern states of the USA? Climate mainly was what attracted us. And then we realized, with no capital, we couldn't afford lawyers, we couldn't get a green card, we had no contacts, so we thought that's not going to work either. UK, we were seriously considering. I'm not quite sure why we didn't go. We'd been there several times to look at the UK, to visit my mother and that. But when my son said, come and look at Canada, we did. And we just thought there might be more opportunity here. Were we right? Were we wrong? I honestly don't know. But it's been tough in Canada, but we also had a good life. We had horses for 12 years when we were here. We don't anymore. We live on a farm. So it's not all bad, but that's the reason we came to Canada.
Yeah, and you touch upon Australia with the immigration system there. I think it is still, you've got to show certain skills to actually get to Australia. Yeah. So it's not as if you're going to Canada or America, where you got to prove yourself. It's a slightly different system.
Canada's also got a lot tougher since we came. My son, who's still in Africa, came here in 2017. We started a business, farming business. He invested a lot of money, and it didn't give him enough points because he didn't have a university degree. He was over 40, and it didn't look like he was going to get permanent residence. So after 2 years, he just got fed up, sold up, went back to Africa. So Canada's not as easy as it was when we came. We were very fortunate to get in. Yeah.
So it says about arriving in Canada at the age of 54, and then you said 98 you were settled, and then 2000 it says here you suffered a heart attack. Now again, I think this is where you get the title from, 5 steps, because it seems like another step. You did the 3 steps in Africa. Now coming to Canada, you encountered elf scare.
Yeah. And I'd been farming, working on a farm, doing work, doing jobs that I used to pay people to do on my own farm in Africa. Been working on a farm, earning not a huge salary, but a reasonable way, a living wage anyway, more than a living wage. And then I got a heart attack, and having been self-employed for so many years before that, I actually did work for 2 different farms. So quite legitimately, I set up as a consultant rather than an employee or private contractor, which was great for tax. But when I had the heart attack, it meant I was not eligible for any form of workman's compensation, unemployment, any sort of health benefits. So my income just stopped overnight. Boom. And we hadn't at that stage built up capital. We'd bought a new vehicle, so we had some debt and now no income. So that made life fairly interesting for a while.
Yeah, and again, you survived the adversity. You survived the health scare because you were here today.
Yes.
So it just shows that no matter how much life will knock you back, everyone, and I'll say everyone who watches or listens, can actually will say bounce back, because there's always a way of bouncing back, however difficult it is.
Yep. Yeah, there is. There is.
So then you started internet marketing, writing, speaking, and coaching. And that's a good thing because it's completely different than farming. But it
Yes.
shows that anyone could do anything. So
Yep.
going into the late 2020 now, and I assume this is when the pandemic hit, because this is when I
Yeah.
started the journey. Your latest venture started in 2020, and we will advertise it. You do a podcast show yourself.
That's right. We do. I have a co-host. We took the model from breakfast radio. So many morning radio stations have a man and a woman presenting, and there's always a dynamic between one male, one female, right? Which is different than you find with 2 men or 2 women, and certainly more entertaining than just a solo presenter. So we said, wow, that works well on radio. Let's see if it'll work well in a podcast. And we've done 230 odd episodes, and I've been on several podcasts myself, and we've come across very few that have a co-host, especially, and even fewer with a man and a woman. I've only come across one other one like this. So we've stuck with that model, and we enjoy it, and that's our main activity now. Yeah,
And
it's called the Yakking Show.
Yeah. So and I believe if I can find a link, I'll make sure I put the link in as well, so people will follow you. But
thank you, David. Yeah,
no worries. And then talking about your book now, 5 Steps to Thriving on Adversity. When did you start writing this, and when did it get published?
Okay, so I was in 2014. I was doing quite a lot of public speaking, perhaps 2 or 3 a month, service clubs, churches, workshops for businesses. I remember one really good one, financial services. They had about 14 or 15 consultants who were all earning, I guess, over 100,000 a year in 2014, which was a fair, pretty good salary, but felt hard done by because they felt they should be earning more. So the partners, the 3 partners in the business, one of whom drove a Bentley and the other one another very expensive car, called me in and said, we've heard about you. Can you come and give our people a talk and let them know that they're actually doing pretty well, and that for a lot of people life can be very tough. So I said, sure. So that was one of the more memorable workshops, and certainly their attitude changed after my speech. But what happened was, with all these speeches, everyone said, well, have you got a book? And I said, no. And they said, you've got to write a book. So in I guess it was early 2015, I thought, well, I better write a book. So I sort of messed about for a month or so and got nothing done. I said, got to put a bit of commitment into this. So every weekday morning, I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and all I did was clean my teeth. I didn't shave or anything. No tea, glass of water. Sat at my desk or my computer, and I typed for either an hour or 1,000 words, whichever came first. And some days it was 2,000 words, and that was 5 days a week. And I did that from May till November. And then I thought, well, now I've got a huge pile of written stuff. I need an editor. So I couldn't afford a really good editor, but I got onto a book coach, and she said, look, what you told me sounds intriguing, but unless you're famous or infamous, the memoirs don't sell. So I would send the book to me. I'm not going to read it all, but I'll scan through it and I'll give you some tips. So I did that. And she said, look, you've written enough to fill 400 pages of a paperback. That's too much. What I suggest you do is turn it more into a self-help book and call it 5 lessons or something, or 7 lessons, and use some of the stories from your life to illustrate them, which is how it became 5 Steps for Thriving on Adversity. It's 5 steps that I found helpful for me, and each one has 5 little anecdotes from my life about why I believe that, or why I came to believe that. That's the background to the book. So I self-published and sold 350 copies. I mean, we're talking small beans compared to big sellers. In the first edition, had a reprint, and I'm working through the reprint right now.
Yeah, and I assume it'd be available on Amazon and most bookshops.
No, it's not. Funny, I don't know why. I listed it on Amazon, and then somebody said to me, "We're trying to do a review for you on Amazon, but we can't find your book," and they delisted it. Why? It's not controversial at all. Why they delisted it, I don't know. So I thought, well, I'm an independent thinker, so I thought, well, screw you, Amazon. I'm not going to put it. I'm not going to put it back there. I'll just sell it on my website and when I speak. So and I don't even have an ebook. It's something I've been meaning to get onto. I haven't done it yet. So it's only available on my website. It was in a couple of Canadian bookstores, but they've gone out of business. So it's not there anymore. But if it's on my blog, peterwrightsblog.com, but it's on the yakkingshow.com. There's a shop there, the book's there, and for your listeners, there's a coupon. I'll offer your listeners $5 off. So yakking01, all lowercase, and they can get the coupon to get the book at a discount.
Okay, and I'll make sure, and no doubt you'll email me those details. I'll make sure it's included in it. So I'll include that in the description. So going into the latter stages, and this shows how much you've done in your life. In 2019, you walked around 250 kilometers, which is about 150 miles, on a Camino de Santiago.
Mm-hmm.
You had a heart attack, but you still walked 150 miles. Now, it just shows that you can do anything. That's the bottom word. You can do anything.
That's right. But there was something between the heart attack and the walk. In 2017, my heart condition got worse, or my arteries got more clogged. So in 2017, they said, you need a bypass surgery. I said, really? And they said, well, I'm telling you, if you don't have it, you'll almost certainly have another heart attack within 3 or 4 years, and it'll probably be your last one. So we strongly recommend bypass surgery. So I did. I had bypass surgery, which is not the most pleasant experience. And that was 2017. So when I recovered from that, in my younger days, in my 30s and 40s, I ran marathons, and I ran a number of ultra marathons, 50 milers, 55 milers, some in mountainous conditions. So my days of marathon running are long gone, but I thought I need a big goal. And I heard about the Camino. I thought, I'm going to do that, and I must do it before I turn 70. So I did it when I was 69. Yeah, it was a wonderful spiritual experience. It really, really was.
And it's very uplifting, I would say.
Yes. Yeah. One of the nicest things about it, you walk. I didn't arrange for any of my luggage to be moved forward. I carried everything on my back in my pack, and I didn't book anywhere to stay. I had faith that I would find a bed, which I did. So you have no cares in the world. You have your phone for emergency, but I had it switched off all the time. You have a credit card. You have a couple of changes of clothes in your backpack, and that's it. You don't have to worry about bills, computers, cars, gas, nothing. You just walk, and you're walking through rural areas. People are friendly. They're not going to get heart attacks. They stop it for a siesta between 2 and 4. They accumulate in the village squares at 5, 6, and all have wine, and the kids are running around, and the dogs are yapping, and the goats wander through. And it's fantastic, really. It's a huge, wonderful experience.
Yeah. So going forward, and this is to conclude the interview, how do you see life progressing in your later stages, should I say, in your latter life? How do you see it now?
Well, from a practical point of view, having come here with nothing and not accumulated much in the way of capital for all sorts of reasons, some my fault, some not, I know that I will be working till the day I die. So, and that I'm pleased about that because it gives me a purpose in life. I'm 72 now. I still use a chainsaw, cut wood. We heat with wood, so I cut a huge amount of wood to heat this old farmhouse. I drive my tractor. I clear snow with the tractor. I have done odd farming jobs right up until 18 months ago. I was short of money for a while during the pandemic, so I couldn't do any public speaking. So I milked cows for a year and a half, twice a week, until I was 71. So I'm just so grateful that I can still do that, whereas so many people younger than me, they can't do that, right? I normally walk 2 or 3 miles every morning. I've given it a miss when it's been so cold and dark. Keep fit. So I'm going to keep on doing what I'm doing. I want to do more traveling. I want to get back to UK because since we came here, my wife's 2 children from her first marriage have moved to England with her grandchildren. Her brother's there, my brother and his wife and all his kids are in England. So I want to get over there again soon. Like to see more of the world. Life's full of opportunities. It really is.
Yeah. And my ultimate question, and everyone likes this question, what would you say to, people of, listening? What would you say to inspire them?
What I would say to inspire them is 2 things: is keep asking questions. So that means have an open mind and keep learning. You've got to keep learning because when you ask questions and learn, opportunities arise. And enjoy life. Life's too short to be a spectator. You've got to get out there and really enjoy life and just recognize there'll be ups and downs, as you said, David. That's life. Just accept it. There will be bad days, but my motto that's on my email signature is it's not what happens to you in life, it's what you do about it that counts. And I really believe that, it's how we react and respond that makes the difference, not the bad things that happen.
Yeah, I agree. And you've heard of the expression from Latin, carpe diem, seize the moment. Right. So you do seize the moment.
Absolutely, got to do that.
Peter, thank you for sharing your journey with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real privilege to be on your show, David. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was The Journey, hosted by Wise Words Imaging, hosted by David Hackett. Be sure to like, subscribe and listen to another journey coming soon.